Okay, we're recording and we're live. So welcome everyone to this webinar facilitated and hosted by PAVRO. My name is Faiza Venzant and I'm here with my good friend and colleague, Erin Spink. Not Spinks, it's just one Spink, even though she's enough Erin for many Spinks. It's just Erin. We want to thank PAVRO for making this webinar accessible to everyone today. We want to thank them for the invitation to have this conversation with the leaders of volunteers in Ontario and beyond, because I see there's a couple people here from outside of Ontario. And you know what's really special about this is that in 2009 in Ottawa is where I first met Erin Spink, and we both were new board members for the PAVRO board. And I could tell a really funny story about how Erin didn't like me when she first met me, but I won't. It's a she said story. Anyways, we became really good friends, and one of the things that I really appreciate about Erin is that we could not be two more different people. We've had different backgrounds, different upbringings, different paths that led us into volunteer engagement, and we're still able to agree on some things, disagree on other things, but just work together to help to move our profession forward. Because what's really important to both Erin and I, beyond moving our profession forward, is really beyond moving our communities forward. It's the impact of the work that we do as leaders of volunteers, and we're going to get at the heart of that today. So today in our webinar, come as you are comfortable. We have muted everybody. If you want to share your video, you can. If you want to see everybody else in Zoom, you can just go to the top right of your screen and hit gallery view, and you'll be able to see all the beautiful faces. So if you want to learn and if you want to share your video, go ahead. If you don't want to, it's not a problem at all. We are going to be using Menti to do some interactive talking to you, and we're going to be using the chat box as well. So what's really important today is Erin and I sort of have the floor, and we'll be controlling the flow of this communication and of this webinar. But the strength of this webinar is really going to be up to all of you and your participation. We're just two people, fabulous people, but we're just two people, and we just have two experiences. But this field and us as leaders of volunteers, we are filled with rich and diverse experience, and so we want to hear from everybody. All right. So I want to start with a land acknowledgement, and so important that even in times of crisis, we ground ourselves with the things that we do all the time. And so I acknowledge the land I am on, where I initiate this virtual community, is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. I acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit. I think what's really important in a land acknowledgement, not only acknowledging the ancestors and the history of the land, is to acknowledge your place in the land that you're at. And so I always like to locate myself in the land acknowledgement. Erin, you want to go ahead and locate yourself here?
Yep, I'm going to put my stuff in.
Oh no,
sorry, I'm going to
read the screen.
Right, so I am a settler, born in Canada to immigrant parents whose ancestry is from Switzerland, Germany, and Scotland.
Scotland. And I am a settler born in Canada to immigrant parents from Uganda. All right, so I want to just test out Menti. Obviously, we are all really great at the chat box, but I want to test out Menti, and I want to invite you to locate yourself. So you're going to go to menti.com, www.menti.com, and you're going to use the code 448835. And when you're there, just a real short answer. How do you acknowledge the relationship with the land that you are on? So you heard Erin and I give our statements, but we would love to hear from you. And I just want to welcome, we're up to 100 participants right now, so I just want to welcome anyone who's just joining us. If you're just joining us, head over to menti.com and use the code 448835. We have just done a land acknowledgement, and we want to ask people, how do you acknowledge the relationship with the land that you're on? Beautiful. Living on stolen land as an immigrant from Hong Kong. Thank you for acknowledging that. Settler born to Russian parents. Look at the beautiful diversity of here. And I love that, you know, for some people it's just a word or a feeling that helps you feel what your relationship like is to the land. All right, I'll give you another moment or two. So this is Menti, everybody, and you'll see Erin and I use it throughout the webinar, and
learning is good. That's okay.
Yeah. Oh my God, I love all the expressions of gratitude, grateful, thankful. I love that.
Respectful.
Yeah.
Welcoming.
Yeah.
Uninvited settler. Wow. That's very, very accurate.
All right, so the answers kind of still keep coming in, so I'm gonna just give people another minute or so to answer. And Kimberly, our co-host, if you could take a minute and tell me what your screen name is in the chat box. I can unmute you just when we get to the end of the call to wrap things up, please. Just can't find you when I look at the participant names. Beautiful. All right, thank you, everybody.
All right. So thank you, Faiza. So let's just call the elephant in the room. We've had some major plot twists in the last few months in our lives. Life has taken some big and some scary and difficult turns in the last few months. So we just wanted to acknowledge it and provide that as a bit of a framework for how we're approaching today's conversation. That we want to provide a forum for us to come together and to have a positive conversation around what's next. You know, what is, but also what's next. So that's really kind of what we're trying to use as a mental model for how we're approaching today's conversation. So the next slide is our second mentee quiz. So if you can change the slide there for me, thank you. So we thought it was really important to ask everybody in the room to give us a sense of your current work situation. So are you working same as before COVID? Are you working but it's modified in some way? Are you temporarily laid off? Are you looking for work? Is there something else going on? It's going to help Faiza and I customize kind of some of the conversation, but also I think it's important to acknowledge that as much as we have so much that unites us and brings us together, we're all in very different places, and that's important to recognize. And that even within categories, right? So we see that there's quite a lot of people working in some modified way. There's a lot of diversity in that. You could be working modified duties. You could be working on a modified pay. You could be working on a modified schedule. So we just want to acknowledge that there's a lot of diversity even within these groups. So we'll just give you another second to add that in.
Erin, just let me know when you want me to move on.
Yeah, I think we're good, thanks. So the next slide is another mentee, and so we know a little bit about the kind of formal parameters about your work situation, but how are you feeling? Can you give us a word or two to describe how you're feeling about your current work situation, and recognizing that this is a safe space, and that there's nothing wrong with anything that you're feeling right now?
Yeah, definitely not. And I think, you know, as Erin said, the purpose of today is really to think about a positive way to move forward, but that doesn't mean that when we're thinking of things from a positive standpoint that we can't acknowledge that this is a time where, you know, the biggest words we're seeing here: unsure, anxious, uncertain, overwhelmed. I am definitely feeling all of those things. I'm feeling uncomfortable too. I'm working off my bed a lot of the times, or standing at my kitchen counter, so I'm uncomfortable. Physically, it's uncomfortable.
Yeah, there's
good. I like some of the other stuff too. Some people are saying I'm energized, I'm hopeful.
Yeah.
Good. Freedom, good. Comfortable, engaged.
Hopeful.
Positive. Yep. So there's a mix there. Yeah. And I think it's important for us right now as as leaders of volunteers to understand that there isn't a singular experience happening right now, and so there isn't going to be a singular response. And what's really important is that in the work that you do, in the workplace that you're at, and with the volunteers that you work for, that you acknowledge that, and that you do what is best for the context that you're in. And so we're going to hopefully take you through a few ways to think about that today. All right. Thank you all for sharing that. I'm going to move us on. Yeah. So today what we want to take you through are, three questions. What do we need to consider when we are engaging volunteers during this time right now? So during COVID-19, during this time right now, what are the things we need to consider when engaging volunteers? What is digital engagement versus virtual volunteering? So the context that many of us are in, not all of us, some of us are still going into our workplaces, but for many of us, we are like on my bed or in the kitchen, or sharing space while our children are also trying to do their schoolwork or be around us, or we are at home taking care of other members of our family, or we are at home while other members of our family are also working. And that's the context that we're in. So we're also going to talk about what is digital, what digital and non-digital technology or tools that you're currently using. The situation that we're in right now, we have found ourselves having to rely on technology, probably for some of us more than we were comfortable with, or more than we're used to. For others of us, this is a breeze and this is easy. And if it is, and we want to hear from you as well. And then we want to talk about what's next as well. So someone who I really admire in the volunteer, as a leader of volunteers out of the US, is Jerome Tennille. And he has written a blog post called "The Future of Volunteering is Not Virtual, and I'll tell you why." And the blog post starts with this image. And I'm just real quick, think about if you were to log on today, trying to get onto this webinar, trying to connect to work, trying to connect to family, trying to order groceries. What would you do if you saw this screen? I'm trying to say it without swearing, but I would flip the freak out for sure, because right now, the way I'm staying organized as a mom, first and foremost, and the way I'm staying in touch with my parents who are in their 70s, all the work that I'm doing, everything right now involves in the privilege of me having an internet connection at home, and through my phone, and even having a cell phone. So what I want to say is that today's webinar is about technology and the tools that we're using in this COVID-19 reality. But I also want to ground us all and really bring us back into, this is a snapshot in time. I keep hearing the phrase new normal. This is not a new normal. This is a crisis that we are in the middle of, and we don't have to try to normalize it to to make it feel comfortable. We still need to recognize that this is a crisis. We need to recognize that we are doing our very, 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 very best to make things work for us, but it's not a new normal. We are going to get past this, just like we did with swine flu, just like we did with SARS in Ontario, just like we did after 9/11. There are always going to be these watershed moments that happen. We adapt and we change through them, and then we get past them. Janelle is asking, oh, Jeff was saying, this literally happened to me this morning as the power was out. I'm sorry, Jeff. It's traumatic. Like, it's like we've already lost so much connection to each other, which is why I was like so happy to see all your faces today. But to think about losing that additional connection. We are going to put, oh, Erin has put the article, Jerome's article title in the chat box, and we're going to put it on the end, at the end in a resource guide. And I know that PAVRO is going to send you all the recording of this webinar as well. So it'll be there. You'll be able to hear me say that again. So yeah, we're not in a new normal, folks. We are in the middle of a crisis that's been going on for quite a while. For some of us, it's 8 weeks. For some of us, it's 12 weeks. And we don't know how much longer it's going to go, but it's not going to be forever. Okay. All right. Had to get that out of the way. So when we find ourselves in the middle of a crisis, we also can see that we might be finding ourselves grasping at straws. And so what I want to say is that all of the things that we value and that we aspire to as leaders of volunteers don't fall by the wayside in the middle of the crisis. Now more than ever, we need to hold steadfast to what it means to be an effective leader of volunteers and not grasp at straws. For some of you who are on the front lines, you literally are grasping at straws because the work that you do is feeding people, the work that you do is keeping people alive. And so I understand that. But for many of us, we don't need to use this time to prove our relevance. If you weren't relevant before this crisis is not going to change that. That's something that you will need to think about. But trying to prove your relevance and trying to bend over backwards in the middle of a crisis is not healthy. It's not going to be effective. And what it's going to do is that's the energy that you're going to be taking into your volunteer programs, to your volunteers when we're through the end of this. So what I'm encouraging you to do is, though we are in a crisis, and when we are in a crisis, our innate human nature is flight or fight. What I'm asking you to do is to still try to be thoughtful, still try to be measured, and still try to really think through and be strategic about how you can best serve your volunteers. All right, Erin, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Great, thank you. So the first of a few slides on things that we feel are important for us to consider is the question, how volunteer-centric are you? And are you also includes, is your organization, are your colleagues, all of that. And there's a couple pieces that we'd just like to unpack within that. You hear about donor-centric, human-centric, all of that. I mean, at the, on any given day, we should be volunteer-centric focused. But we really, now is a really important time. And for a couple of reasons. One is we need to acknowledge loss. There is a reality that we know that volunteers wear many hats. Volunteering with us is just one of those. They may be also working. They may also be, as Faiza said, going through all the same things that we're going through in terms of caring for family or struggling or in a challenging situation. But we also know that, for many of our volunteers, their role with us, their work with us is a very important part of their social lives. For some, we know that there's many of our older seniors that volunteer with us, and this is their major social outlet. This is their community. We are their communities. And there's also a huge sense of self and identity that many volunteers have. In fact, research showed years ago that the biggest differentiator between people who volunteer and people who don't is that people who volunteer identify themselves as volunteers. And so there's a huge amount of self-esteem that comes from that. And so there may be temporary changes to our volunteers' ability to be involved with us, either because of our choice for their safety, or their choice because of their reality right now. So it could be temporary, it could also be permanent. Life has maybe changed very drastically. We know it's changed drastically for many people. So we need to acknowledge that just as we're going through these things, our volunteers are going through, just as much. So being volunteer-centric is part of acknowledging that, and what they're going through. Another piece of being volunteer-centric and the things we need to keep in our minds is communications. And for this, we need to consider, are we communicating to, or are we communicating with volunteers? It's a really good practice at any time, but especially when there is so much stress, so much confusion, so much anxiety, all the words, that we did see on the screen that you're feeling. You have to ask yourself, is your focus with what you're communicating what you want to tell volunteers, or is it based on what you know they need to know and what they've told you is important to them? And we also have to think about things like frequency, how often are you communicating, the messaging itself, and the methods. We really, Saskia just jumped in on the chat saying, like, she's calling all volunteers in person, hearing a human voice, absolutely. That was a brilliant segue, Saskia, because the next thing I want to talk about with communications is channel richness. Some of you may be familiar with that. That concept within communication is channel richness. And we know that if we go from something like email on one side of the scale to in-person communication is much more rich because we can actually see and read so much more into situations, whereas email is a little bit more one-dimensional. And so how can you deepen communication right now with volunteers, obviously while being respectful of what their realities are? Little things like we've done where, we were turning our cameras on so that we can see each other's faces. Little things like that go a long way to really increasing the richness of the communications that you're giving. But it also is rich because you are getting back so much more information. And that's also part of being volunteer-centric.
I think, Erin, if I can jump in, when it comes to frequency, I would just say, just remember that your volunteer has many facets and aspects to their life. When all of the COVID, the isolation started, my inbox was flooded. My phone didn't stop ringing. Like everyone was reaching out, which I really appreciated, but it became overwhelming. Mm-hmm. And now here I am, we're in, I don't know what week we are, 7 or 8. And I gotta say, like, I'm missing it a little bit. I found it overwhelming at the beginning, but I kind of feel forgotten by a couple places as well, where the communication is kind of really slowed down and petered out. And so think about that as well. Like, remember that you are only one channel in somebody's whole entire world, and gauge how important or how vital your channel is.
Mm-hmm. And I think, thanks for that, Faiza, because I think it also raises one other piece around communications that I didn't mention, which is choice, right? So I think, and that kind of leads in nicely to planning, is think about, for those people this is just a part of being human, is some people want and need more communication than others. It doesn't always have to be a push, right? It can also be a pull. So if it's a blog post or an update on a Facebook page where people can choose to go and get those updates and that communication from your organization, you should also consider that, because then you have that flexibility. And just jumping down to the fourth point around relationships, what you do now can either strengthen or undermine the relationship. But let me just go down to planning. So really thinking about, and as Faiza said, being deliberate, being intentional, being strategic, and not reactive is really important right now. So really deeply considering what are your organization's needs right now, and what are your volunteers' needs? Where is there that kind of beautiful synergy between the two? You know, where are there those opportunities? Some people, as we've acknowledged, are feeling very pressured to plan. But the reality is we don't really know what the future holds, what it will look like, and in what place volunteers will be. So for example, you know, in my organization, we had talked about using this time to bring on volunteers who have a really long, a multi-step onboarding process, so that we're ready when the program reopens to just activate them. But the challenge is that could be months from now, and we don't know at what point those volunteers will be in months from now.
Yep.
So, you know, so it's sometimes, you know, it's like the saying, discretion is the better part of valor. Sometimes patience is actually the better part of planning right now. Now is a great time to focus on those relationships and those foundational pieces, because you know, planning to strengthen relationships is never wasted time. It's never wasted energy, and it will never actually go out the window. You don't need to actually, some of your strategies and tactics might change to strengthen relationships, but it's never time wasted to plan how can we, you know, deepen our relationships with our volunteers. And as I said, it's really your and your organization's actions and inactions right now that are strengthening or undermining your relationships with volunteers. We all know that our organizations depend on the active goodwill of volunteers in good times. And yet, you know, the reality is that it's times like these, we need them even more, right? We need them, you know, we need them and all their support. If volunteers are feeling left out of the loop, ignored, what does that mean for how well your organization will fare through this? How, you know, how will that impact? Will you have the strong ambassadors that they currently are in your community, talking to others about your mission? If you're not strengthening relationships right now, will volunteers be as inclined or feel as empowered and motivated to tell others about what your needs are right now, right? And so now is a perfect time to really consider how you strengthen relationships and really take a deep lens of is what you're doing strengthening a relationship or undermining it? So I'm going to pass it over to Faiza for the last 2 points.
Awesome. And you know, just before I talk about the last 2 points, I want to just say some of the great stuff that I'm seeing in the chat box. This is why I love our sector, and this is why I love this technology, because I'm learning so much from you all right now. So I love, Saskia mentioned that she's surveying her volunteers to ask them what their communication preferences are. Kathleen mentioned that they organized a movie night. So everyone who could and had the access would watch a documentary from CBC Gem, and then they spent 45 minutes after they watched the documentary together talking about it. And I love that. Book clubs, movie nights. I'm seeing a lot of things around community circles, so just checking in and talking about anything. I love that idea of just connection for the sake of connection. Like, it has nothing to do with mission, it has nothing to do with getting our work done, but we're just connecting because at the core of it, that's also such a vital aspect to what we do. I think Kim Umbach is saying, weekly prayer time with a virtual coffee hour. We are faith-based. I can't tell you. My parents are both in their 70s and go to the mosque every day, and they are really missing that part of their life, that connecting around faith daily. And so they've been finding ways to do that virtually as well. Kathy said, I'm organizing senior volunteers to call the entire team. So I love all of these ways that you're pivoting and you're trying different things, involving other people in the work that you do. Porch drop-offs during National Volunteer Week. How amazing, how amazing. So,
awesome.
So when we talk about being volunteer-centric, there's 2 other things that I think are really important. So assumptions. I think that, you know, for me, a big assumption that has really kind of like slapped me in the face, and I've really had to check my class privilege here, is that I have assumed that a lot of people who work and who have a full-time job have access to technology at home. Because for me, I take my laptop home and I do my work home. So we really need to check our assumptions about first, access to technology, and you know, what do people have access to? So when we are, I'm hearing a lot of people saying we're offering our volunteers training online, or we're offering them to do virtual volunteering work. What does it feel like when you don't have access to not, you know, to be a volunteer, to be presented with a new opportunity in the middle of a crisis and not be able to give again? So challenge your assumptions around what people have access to, and then work with what you know that they have. Challenge your assumptions about availability. I can tell you that right now I am not available for most of my volunteer work because my work and my home life are now connected. And so when I was at work, using my lunch hour or getting there half an hour early or leaving a half an hour late, and doing some of my volunteer virtual work at that time is not able to happen because I don't have that time anymore. And that's just the one experience that I have. But one of the things at the Y, where I work at the YMCA of Greater Toronto, is we realized very quickly at the beginning of this crisis, by the number of people who were telling us we're not going to be coming in for our shifts for, you know, an indefinite period of time, is that we realized that this crisis had an impact on people's availability. And they told us that, and it really helped us to quickly make the decision to suspend volunteering activities. That's very specific to the context that I work in, where we have a ton of students who are now not available because they're learning online. They're trying to figure out other ways to get their placement hours. And so all the assumptions that we worked with in terms of people's availability pre-COVID no longer are in play right now. And so challenge those assumptions, think about people's access to technology, and when you're offering things that rely on them to have access to technology, you know, how much further away might you be making somebody feel? Also think about the transferability of all of the things that you're putting in place now. So, you know, in a crisis there, we all pivot, we think of different things that we're gonna do. How much of that is gonna be transferable when we get past COVID? Don't forget some of the brilliant things that you're doing right now. And, you know, if they would be useful down the road. I personally would never think of doing a porch drop-off and going to my volunteer's home. It's just not something that I do in the scope of my work. But I can see that for some people, that is something that would be comfortable for you. And so think about if that's something that you might transfer post-COVID. The other thing, when we're thinking about how volunteer-centric are you, and I'm talking to you as a leader of volunteers, think about relevance right now. I think that because of modified work, and we saw that some people are laid off on our call, we saw that some people are looking for work, we know that people are nervous about job security, that this is a time where people are really trying to demonstrate and prove their relevance. Think about your actions, and are they Faiza-centric, or whoever you are centric, or are they volunteer-centric? If you're doing things right now to prove your relevance for your own survival and your own organization, chances are that those are not volunteer-centric actions that you're taking. If you can prove the impact of having your position and having someone of your skill and your experience in your position, and think of it in that volunteer-centric way, I think that you will have more success. So when you are thinking about relevance, think about your organizations, because we know that some organizations right now are really struggling. I think about like Habitat for Humanity right now. Highly relevant because people need a home to stay safe in, but somewhat not relevant because people can't come together to build homes. And so how do you think of those two things together? So spend some time thinking about what relevance means to you personally, to your organization, and to your volunteers. Anything in the chat box that you wanted to share, Erin, before we move on? You there, Erin, Spink? Oh, I think you may have, you muted. Can you unmute, or do you need me to mute you? I'm just going by in the chat box. Okay, give me a second, Erin. I need to find you on. All right, give me a second. Sorry, guys. Erin, don't unmute yourself again. Wagging my mom finger at you. Sorry, guys, for this little pause. Erin, can you like yell, and I'm going to see if the screen will change to your face. It's hard for me to find you with the 100 screens that I'm looking at. Erin, I need to unmute you. The webinar is not without you. All right. This is me in panic mode, guys. This is what I look like. All right. Let's see. Erin, let me find you. I'm going to scroll through all these beautiful faces here. Give me 1 sec, folks. I got to stop sharing my screen or I'm going to just pause sharing it for a minute here just so I can find Erin and unmute her. Erin, are you able to really quickly share your screen? When you do that, you will pop up for me. Oh, there you are. I see you. All right, is it working? Trying to unmute you. Give me a second here.
Now. Yeah, there we go.
There's a beautiful voice. All right. So,
sorry, guys. I muted myself because I've been typing in the chat and I didn't want to have the background noise. So sorry about that.
You're back. There you go. So now you just made me laugh. She said, "I appreciate how Faiza is making me feel better about my online." I'm here to serve. I'm here to serve my friends.
There's some really great stuff, some great sharing in the chat. There's some resources. Adam Janes shared a really great piece around Connected Canadians, helps people learn tech. You know, I think there's just, there's a lot of really good conversation happening. Keeping mission and organization relevant for all of it, and then just people trying to help me with my inability to unmute. So thank you, everybody. This was a team effort.
My God, I love leaders and volunteers. I miss you all so much. Okay, so getting kind of teary-eyed here. All right, so let's move on. So in continuing our conversation about how we can work within this context, you know, obviously a really big consideration right now has to be safety. It has to be safety. And when you're thinking about safety, the first thing I want to say is that please remember, and I know that I don't have to tell you this, but volunteers are people. They are not tools. Kind of broke my heart the other day. I was watching a newscast out of the US. My husband's American. He's cute. Don't be mad at him. And so we watch some American stuff from time to time. And there was an organization that furloughed 90% of its workforce, but then replaced them with volunteers. And, you know, they were talking about the big success story that they said was how the community came together and all these volunteers came together. And you could see in the footage that they had absolutely no regard for these volunteers' safety. There were people in vulnerable groups represented in the images that I saw. There was no physical distancing, no mask, a lot of physical touching, and I felt like, wow, this organization got it wrong. And so they were looking at volunteers as tools and as bodies, and not as people who are important and whose safety needs to be considered. So when we think about safety, first and foremost, we need to consider all aspects of health and wellness. And I want to cheer for my friends at Volunteer Toronto who have been doing some amazing work, reaching out to volunteers and doing webinars and learning on self-care for volunteers, which is so important right now. And so thinking about all aspects of health and wellness. And I think in our previous slides, and from what I see about in the chat box is a lot of you are already doing that by having ways for people to connect face-to-face, porch drop-offs, community gatherings, bringing people together. You are thinking of people's health and wellness. And it goes without saying that we are also trying to consider staff wellness, but for the purpose of today's webinar, we're really focusing on volunteers. The other thing that I think we need to consider when it comes to safety immediately are all the things that we are doing to be safe today. Staying at home, social and physical distancing. For some people, it's about hand washing and wearing masks, thinking about people who are immunocompromised, and the parts of our population who are being hit harder by COVID-19. What I also want you to think about is an echo pandemic. So what happens when all of this is over? What's the next pandemic to come? It could be a health pandemic, but it could very well be a mental health pandemic. And unpacking and having to think about the effect of this pandemic on all parts of our society, our volunteers as well. So one of the things that I think that you need to think about, and we're going to talk about reintroduction and reintegration is, but when we're ready to open our doors and when we're ready to welcome our volunteers back in, who are we welcoming, right? Are we welcoming the upbeat, positive young person that we worked with before? Are we upbeat? Are we welcoming back now someone who suffered a loss of a family member, a loss of a grandparent, a loss of parents who have lost their jobs? So this pandemic now, we're thinking of it from a health perspective. There will be waves and there will be things that we need to deal with once we're through it, and that's what we mean by an echo pandemic. There may be second waves of COVID-19. We don't know. That's the thing, is that we really don't know, right? Like, we can think as much as we want, we can strategize as much as we want. We really don't know, and we don't know when we open our doors again, or when we go back to the levels of service and programming that we did pre-COVID-19. We could have a second wave. We could have another pandemic. We really don't. We could have a natural disaster. We have no idea. And so we also need to be prepared to take the lessons around safety that we are learning right now and move them forward. When it comes to safety, I think we also have to think about reintroduction and reintegration. So when we are reintroducing volunteers back to the community, back into our organizations, and we are reintegrating, what are the safety precautions that we are going to be putting in place? The things that we've learned from what we're living right now, and also when we think about people's mental health, what are the things we need to put into place for their mental health as well? We need to remember, as sorry, Erin, were you going to say something?
Oh no, sorry. Go ahead. I'll jump in after.
That's right. So Oriana popped into the chat box. She's trying to, I think it's a she, I'm sorry if I'm assuming, trying to wrap my head around how we will reintegrate volunteers, mainly seniors, back into our hospital. What is this going to look like from a risk perspective? Will they be comfortable coming back? This is so important. And, looking at some other cities that are starting to open up in some other countries where COVID was hit before, we're seeing a staggered reintegration. And so we're seeing that people of a certain age or people from certain workplaces or who provide certain services are able to open up while others are not. And one thing we are seeing is that some of our seniors are sort of being the last to be let to roam free, for a better way of saying it. So thinking about, if you're an organization where seniors do make up a huge part of your population, you might need to be putting in some of the things that you're putting into place now for a little bit longer. So while you're up and running, you still might need to be doing porch drop-offs. You still might need to be engaging your volunteers in tandem at the same time, depending on what reintegration and reintroduction looks like. So, what levels of service and connection can you keep up, keep going?
Yeah, and I would just add, Faiza, I know, I think we're starting to get away from this kind of imagery or thinking around it, but as you said, like, this isn't a switch. We don't flip it on and off, right? Yeah. There's got to be a gradual, there's got to be a very considered and measured way. And I love what Carol said in the chat about, like, how to make them safe, but also feel safe. And a coworker shared some marketing insights about how safe, like how likely are people to come out to large scale events like concerts and things like that. And it varies significantly. It varies between Canada and America, actually. Quite significantly, right? So there is going to be, you know, the old kind of saying, once bitten, twice shy. Like, things are not just going to be flipped back to that quote unquote normal, right? So
There's a great message in the chat box right now about someone who's saying that for health and safety reasons, we're asking volunteers over 65 years of age to stay home. Some people are, and they're doing this based on public health guidelines. And so some people are saying this is ageism or it's discriminatory. And so how do we communicate that? Amazing question. So I think what you're doing is great. You're saying that you're going on, you're doing this based on public health's recommendations and guidelines, and getting people to understand that this isn't personal. I think, and I'll share with you, I was, so we had in Ontario, we had March break from school. I was working from home that whole week, and many people were. That was kind of like the first week when people were starting to shut things down. I worked so hard that week because I was trying to prove my relevance. I was trying to say not really prove my relevance, but prove the relevance of our volunteers. I was so worried about their safety, and I was pushing my organization to make the decision to stop it, like just to suspend everything and take a pause. And right when they made that decision, they laid off 4,000 employees. And I think I took it personally, and then I realized it was 4,000 employees. And then I started seeing in the stats and in the news that, you know, the hundreds of thousands of Canadians that were getting laid off. And then I realized, like, this is not about you, Faiza. This is, this is a crisis, and everyone is doing their best and unprepared and trying to figure this out. And so that really hit home for me, that not to take it personally, and that whole piece around having to prove my relevance or the relevance of the volunteers. I'm just conscious of the time, and I want to get through some more of the interactive pieces here. A lot of good comments in the chat box of people saying, like, we have no idea when people will come back. I also think people need to be prepared for sort of like hyper volunteering, so that a lot of people will be out of a job and will be looking at volunteerism. And we'll not want to be thinking about your screening practices and having to wait for a vulnerable sector screening. They want to volunteer right now, so that they can be doing things to build their resume, get experience, to get back into the job market. I know that our federal government just announced a grant for students who volunteer between May and November, which I think is a great way to provide some financial security to students. But man, oh man, they put us in a tough position. Like, what are we supposed to do with that? You know, when we've suspended volunteering, and the government makes this announcement, much like they did when it was 40 hours of community involvement, and then the burden is on not-for-profits to all of a sudden produce meaningful work for people so that they can access this funding. Like, that's a whole nother webinar, people. But what I'm trying to say is that I think that both sides are valid. I think that there are going to be people who aren't going to be feeling safe coming back, and then I think there's going to be a surge of people who are looking for immediate opportunities right now. Okay, so when it comes to working with volunteers right now, timing and responsiveness needs to be considered as well. I want to say that it is okay if you are in an organization where your service is not essential today, and it is okay for you to sit on the sidelines and just wait it out for the health of the entire community. It's okay. Sitting on the sidelines doesn't mean not doing anything. It could also mean reaching out to other organizations. So an example of that, for example, is how we're seeing organizations connecting and helping each other. So I'll give you an example from the YMCA of Greater Toronto. We don't run a food bank, and we don't talk about food. We don't do a lot around food security, except for one organic farm that we run at one of our outdoor education centers. But that's not our wheelhouse. That's not our expertise. But in our community, many of our community partners, our local food banks and food pantries are experiencing higher levels of users coming to use their services. And what we do have is we have a membership of 77,000 people. We have huge spaces. And so we are sitting on the sidelines, but we're supporting the people in our community who need our support right now. So we are running a drive-through food drop-off at our 9 health and fitness centers where people can drive up. Our staff will take things out of your car, so you don't have to touch anything. They don't have to touch you. You don't have to be close to them. They will take things out of your car and store it in our facilities. And then different local food banks that we've partnered with can come and pick it up as they need, can sort at our facilities where we have huge gyms and open spaces where they might not have that right now. So that can also be what sitting on the sidelines look like. I see a lot of organizations galvanizing their volunteers to make masks, to make scrub caps, and to be supporting our local community healthcare providers and frontline workers. We see a lot around pivoting. So we see a lot of people who have been used to delivering their programs and services face-to-face, finding ways now to do that online. So at the Y, we're doing that by offering fitness classes. We have a Facebook Live channel with between 5 and 10 classes every day. And there's fitness classes, there's children's programming, there's arts activities, there's lectures and seminars. And that's sort of an example of how people are pivoting. Putting in temporary measures, right? So it's okay right now if there are temporary measures that you are putting into place to make things work for the situation as it is. Some of those you may keep going, or some of those you may start putting into a disaster plan or a contingency plan or a continuity plan down the road. Likewise, there may be permanent changes, and unfortunately that means loss of services. I was so heartbroken to hear that the Jean Augustine Center in Etobicoke has lost 95% of their funding, and they're frantically trying to raise money right now to keep their center open. And unfortunately, you know, there may be some permanent changes that that mean loss of services, loss of organizations, community agencies. But the permanent changes might also be that some of the creativity and content that's coming out of this pandemic might be things that you take forward. I see some people doing volunteer screening online and thinking, hey, you know what, this actually is working really well and I'm able to do everything that I would do in person. And so to save some person parking money or the time it takes to come to my office, I'm going to continue doing screening online through Zoom or through FaceTime. And so that responsiveness could lead to some permanent changes. In terms of timing and responsiveness as well, as much as it's hard to predict what's going to come in the future, we do need to look beyond COVID. And Erin has, I'm going to plug some stuff that Erin's doing. Maybe Erin, could you plug your ebook, specifically Christine Martin's chapter, and your survey? Can I turn it over to you to do that? Sorry to
Sure.
But could you do that?
Yeah, thank you. So I'm just putting it in the chat box. So this is a global survey for leaders of volunteers and for volunteers, because it's really important in my mind that we hear from both sides of the coin. And so we've had literally hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of leaders of volunteers complete this survey. It's really talking about what is the landscape, what are some of the challenges you're facing, and then for volunteers, it's also asking them, what do they need from us right now? And the intent is that I will do a couple waves of this, because we know that things are changing and evolving as the pandemic is going on. So if you haven't taken the survey, please, I would love to hear your thoughts and your feedback, but also please share it with volunteers. Would love to make sure that we've got a really great sample size of volunteers and their feedback. And I'm just going to put the ebook, as Faiza said, Christine Martin did a wonderful chapter in the top 20 ideas for volunteer engagement in 2020 about design thinking, and really, you know, design thinking is really that kind of future focus of, we can't tell the future, but we see trends, right? And a lot of those things are very much outside of volunteer engagement. So so I put those in, and Alex has said that PAVRO will resend the survey too. So thank you so much. And appreciate everybody participating. All of the resources will be available for free, and I'm doing a webinar for PAVRO in May, which is actually today. It's gonna be May.
Happy May Day.
So it's so we'll be sharing those resources, sharing that insight to really hopefully equip the profession so that we can just thrive throughout this.
All right, Erin, we've been at it for an hour. We have half an hour to go. Yeah. I just had to stretch my legs. I'm gonna just ask everyone, let's just take 30 seconds to just like stretch our necks. Really, I know I'm on camera and I wanted to do this without you thinking that I was weird, but I just needed to stretch my arms out. All right, if anyone wants to, I'm on my bed, so if I stand up, you don't want to see.
She's only dressed from the top half.
No, I am wearing my jeggings, I told you.
Oh, that's right, that's right.
And earrings, I put earrings on today. Just take a second to stretch.
Oh, nice.
Drink of water.
Good stretching going on there. Nice.
Yeah, take a drink of water. Do what you need to do to make this learning comfortable for you, okay? I want you to...
Christopher's moving. I see him boogieing in his chair there.
Yeah. Erin, somebody's asking in the chat box, can these links be sent to us via email? So we will send a link to the recording of this webinar, and PAVRO will send that out to everybody, and PAVRO will also send you these 2 links as well. We'll make sure we send them to Joanne, the amazing Joanne, to get out to all of you.
Yes.
All right. Okay, here we go.
All right.
First time I've done that on a Zoom call, but I was feeling the call. All right, Erin.
All right, next slide. So wanted to talk a little bit about digital engagement versus virtual volunteering. Let's be honest, guys. None of this is new. We're talking about digital engagement and virtual volunteering, as if they're new things. But that's like saying that the next big trend is episodic volunteering. For those of us that have been around the block, we know that this has been around for decades, literally decades. So the point is, don't be seduced by buzzwords, right? It can be one of the big words that we saw in that word cloud when we asked you how you're feeling right now is pressured. Don't be pressured. Don't be seduced by buzzwords. You know your stuff. We know what we do. And this is not new. So we wanted to kind of unpack this for anybody who is feeling uncomfortable. Digital engagement is a strategy. It involves basically any conversation online, and one definition is basically that it's the use of digital tools and techniques to find, listen to, and mobilize a community around an issue. Now, does that sound familiar to anybody? Because that's exactly what we do in volunteer engagement.
Absolutely.
That's because volunteer engagement is also a strategy, and the difference is, we tap into people's times and talents to mobilize a community around an issue. And so, in contrast, virtual volunteering is just the how. Right? And we can use that how for any number of strategies. It's how are we achieving success? How are we getting to our goals with that strategy? And a lot, virtual volunteering, when Faiza and I talked about it, we both agreed it's a little bit more broad than some people, might have the impression. Virtual volunteering is also remote, right? And many of us who support rural communities, guys, we've been doing this a long time, right? So it's not just online, it can be remote. So just the point here is just don't get stressed out about this. Don't get caught up in the buzzwords. At the end of the day, our middle name is engagement. The population, the people that we engage happen to be volunteers, but what we do is build community and connect. And digital engagement is one of our strategies. Virtual volunteering is one of our hows that we do that. But we've got this. We've been doing this. So, you know, we shouldn't feel pressured or concerned or stressed about this, because this is absolutely in our wheelhouse.
Absolutely. And also don't confuse virtual volunteering and remote volunteering are two different things with the same purpose, right? Like virtual means it's online, but people have been remote volunteering for ages and ages and ages. Just before we move on, Erin, Deb has a question. Could we get the link to the legislation where students are able to get funding for volunteering from May to August? Jessica Payne Parks, I saw you on here earlier. If you are still with us on the webinar, would you mind finding that link and putting it in the chat box so that people don't have to awkwardly see my lack of Google skills right now?
Yeah.
All right. So we need to hear from you. We need to hear from you because, you know, Erin and I are just Erin and I. Thank you, Alex, for putting that link in the chat box. All right, so pop on over to Menti again, and we want to hear, as a result of COVID-19, you know, on a scale of 1 to 10, I learned to use technology. Are you a heck yes, or a heck no, or yep, that's me? As a result of COVID-19, I have taught someone else to use a new type of technology. Look how fast that went to a 10. As a result of COVID-19, I have used existing technology in a new way. Amazing. This is what I was hoping we'd say. I was telling Erin that I have some assumptions going into this webinar, and some of them are right. As a result of COVID-19, I am zoomed out, except for today, right? Except for Erin and I. I'm zoomed out too, folks, and it's it's okay. It's okay. You're not zooming me out.
This is really interesting.
Yeah.
This is really interesting.
I love that, you know, 64% of people are saying that they used, I've learned to use a new technology, and we're going to get to, want to hear what they are pretty soon. I've taught someone else to use a new type of technology. Used existing technology in a new way and zoomed out. Yeah.
I love that, you know, I mean, if we look at that third one, Faiza, the highest, that we've used technology in a new way, that's exactly what you were talking about before with pivoting. And what I was just saying is, like, guys, we got this. Like, this is, like, we are capable of this. This is part of our wheelhouse.
Yeah, yeah. Awesome.
Yeah.
And if anyone's interested, Jessica has started a blog, Learn with Jessica Payne Parks, and she did a blog about it's called the Canada Student Service Grant. And she did a blog post there, and I know she will continue to write about how that grant evolves. All right, thank you guys. So it's interesting to see who's learning to use new technology, who's using existing technology in a new way. Not everybody is as zoomed out as I thought, so I'm glad that I checked that assumption. So, you know, what technology are you using? Pop that into the chat box, because I would love to know what people are using, and maybe we can even talk about some of that. So Zoom's a big one. Zoom, Teams, yep. Razor's Edge, Canva, yes. Video editing, Zoom, Teams. Google Hangouts, CrowdStack, yeah.
It's interesting.
GoToMeeting, yep. So a
lot about connecting, right? I mean, this is all about connecting with people.
Yep.
Well, I mean, so I put in Menti, so I'm hoping other people, this was something that that Faiza introduced to me. So that was, I don't know if that's new to other people too. Wow, yeah, like it's interesting how Zoom, like you said, yeah, Mentimeter. Lynn,
I wish
saying,
I had bought some
like this Menti. Yeah.
I love that Sharon said house party, WhatsApp, Facebook video chat. Like, we've been using Facebook Live at the YMCA.
Yeah.
I love house party. We started using it as a family. We have like a weekly call, and it's just such a fun, it's just if you're looking to just get together for the sake of get together, look up Jackbox TV. I should type these in here. Jackbox TV, House Party, just some really fun interactive games that you can play online if people have access to the technology. WebEx, Skype, Jitsi, oh, very cool. Canva, MailChimp, Player Piano, Skype and SurveyMonkey, yep, Drawful, yeah.
Cool.
Awesome. I want to let this go for a little bit so that if you need to look back at the webinar recording, you will see some of this stuff scroll up. So Kahoot, oh, I love Kahoot. So if you are curious about Menti, Kahoot is just like another really fun way to play games, and it got more bells and whistles, kind of more millennial friendly versus like office professional corporate.
There it is again.
Kahoot, yeah, Kahoot is really great.
Oh my God, RC Cola version, that's hysterical.
Typeform polls. Like, we got this, guys, we got this.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
Yeah. So listen, if you are trying to figure out how to use one of these technologies, reach out to your local AVA, reach out to any of the folks that you're seeing here in the chat box, because it's not difficult to learn these things. Zoom, Menti, there are these really quick 2- and 3-minute videos on how to learn how to use them.
What a great way for a volunteer to, you know, to share their screen with you and walk you through it, right?
Yeah.
Or vice versa.
Yeah. Yep.
That's great.
All right. Let me just see how many answers have we got. All right, so we're at 99 answers and 99 people. I'm just gonna let, oh, Slack. I'm just gonna let the scroll go so that our recording can capture it. Poll everywhere, awesome. Better impact, yep. I think we're really seeing the power of our databases and the software that we're using in a time like this. And I have been hearing some good things about Better Impact, Razor's Edge, any of those cloud-based softwares. All right, I'm gonna move it along because I wanna make sure we have some time for question and answers. Oh, and we have a special appearance by my little boy. Come here, you can come here. Erin, do you want to take this?
Sure.
All right, take this away while I do.
Super. So the next question that we have for you in Menti is, what non-digital tools are you using? So we just had a wonderful preview of all those. It's a handwritten note. Love it. You know, and the thing is that it's not all digital like we talked about. So let's see what non-digital tools you're using. Phone calls, sending mail, yes.
I can hear.
You can't see her, but you can hear her voice, right? That's Auntie Erin.
Hi, Auntie Erin.
Hi, my love. How are you?
Working from home. Okay, are you done? Sorry, Erin. You had his attention for all 30 seconds.
No, that's okay.
That's okay.
Hi, Kayam.
It was Malik. It's like, what are you doing?
Was it? I didn't even recognize the voice.
What are you doing? Who are you talking to? I can't see her. I got to say, like, my kids are Zoomed. Like, my kids are not interested in any of these online offerings. It's so interesting. They just want physical touch. They want people. So it's going to be really interesting when they reintegrate into school. What that's going to be like. Posters, telephone, phone calls. It's like the resurgence of the phone.
Yeah.
I love this. And I really hope, like, we don't have a landline, and I kind of wonder, like, what happens if we lose cell service? Because we haven't had a landline for so long.
Yeah, porch drop-off.
Yeah, I love the porch drop-off.
Surveys.
I love the porch drop-offs, and then at the same time, I'm just like thinking of safety, and I'm thinking of like the personal and the professional colliding, and what's that like, and like what's that going to look like? What's that going to look like down the road? Like, you know? Yeah.
Lindsay's asking about, does everyone feel comfortable sending mail right now? You know, obviously there's the challenge of going to the post office. You know, wonder how people feel having something physical come into their homes. I don't think it's paranoia. Andrea doesn't think I like all every piece of mail I get. Alex Jarowski's asking if people are paying for postage themselves. So, I mean, and that's why there's a lot to unpack with all this, right? And that's why it's so important that we are really volunteer centric, thinking about safety, taking into consideration. And guys, there's no right or wrong answer, right? We're doing the best that we can.
Yeah. Alex Gorowski, I really appreciate you bringing that up, right? What is the cost of working from home? I have colleagues who are going out and buying tablets and laptops, and because there's this expectation to work from home, I think it's really important before you incur any expenses that you are flagging that. And please don't think that because you're flagging that to your supervisor, your manager, your leadership, that makes you any less relevant. What you're really doing is shedding a light on what it looks like to work from home. And a lot of people who are in leadership positions are set up to work from home, whereas a lot of people who are not set up to work from home. And so these things don't occur to them. I had a call with my CEO this week, and I mentioned to him that I was on a Zoom call with a colleague who is sitting in their bathroom, like their toilet is their chair and their bathroom counter is their desk. And they're doing that for 6 hours a day. And it kind of floored him. And he was like, it didn't occur to me, because he has a dedicated space in his home where he works from home. And as an introvert, he admitted he's kind of enjoying being able to be at home. And so I think it's important to raise those things, because I think all of us have compassionate, kind leaders who want to really understand what the reality of working from home is, if that is your reality. So talk about, if you need to be reimbursed for upping your data plan, installing internet, snail mail, gas for doing porch drop-offs.
I did see chocolate in there, which is always one of my go-to non-digital tools.
Yeah. Awesome. Okay, I'm going to move us along, Erin.
Move on. Yeah.
All right.
So, the pessimist sees difficulty in every opportunity. The optimist sees the opportunity in every difficulty. Let's be real. There are some real pain points. But if Faiza can move to the next slide, we also believe that there are wonderful opportunities in all of this. So we'd like to, as we start to come to a close, hear from you about what opportunities has this crisis presented for leaders of volunteers. We are possibility makers. We are connectors. We are builders. And right now, there's a lot of building that needs to take place. So wonderful. Well, thank you. This meeting today, huge opportunity. What else? What other opportunities has this crisis presented? It could be reflection. So Saskia just said that. Slow down my pace, feel more rooted, deeper appreciation of volunteers by staff, more connection. I think that was Jessica that wrote, I started a blog, really saying, what can I do? There is a moment of pause. There is a moment of space that we have right now. And that is a privilege and an opportunity. More thoughtful decisions, re-examining organizational structure, connecting more with one another. Great, some people are having more volunteers applying, right? And what an opportunity. Doing the basics that maybe, not so sexy, like filing and data entry, but are really important. And this situation right now is such a perfect example of that. And as you all know, I'm all about data-informed volunteer engagement. So I'm always going to plug that stuff. New ways of engaging, thinking. How much I love my job. That's, just figuring out, is this what I want to do?
Yeah. I just want to say thank you to whoever that is that's working in the hospital right now. We love you, and your reality is so different from mine right now, but thank you for being on the front lines and redeploying and doing what it is that you're doing.
Yeah.
Seeing staff seeing the value of volunteers. Yeah, that is an opportunity that has come out of this. Absolutely.
Yeah.
There's been some I just want to point out to Alex and Kimberly and Joanne and the PAVRO board, there's quite a bit of activity in the chat box around reintegration and reintroduction and how volunteers are going to be engaged post-pandemic. So I'm just going to throw it out there that maybe that is an offering that PAVRO or one of the other AVAs or DOVIAs can offer, like a discussion to come together and for people just to start to talk about where they're at with their thinking around reintegration and reintroduction of volunteers. So I see those, I've seen that comment come up a couple times in the chat box, and it's not the focus for us today, but maybe we could find some space to do that.
Okay. Yeah, and it's needed. It's needed.
Absolutely, yeah. All right, I'm going to move us along. So what are, Erin, I'm going to skip this one, okay? Just because we've got 9 minutes left, 9 minutes left, because I think a lot of you have already answered this question by telling us what you are doing. I want to share with you some resources that we have. Oh, what happened to my resources page? Oh,
there it is.
Number one resource, by far, hands down, number one resource is us, is each other. We need to lean on each other. If you are a PAVRO member, get yourself familiar with our membership directory. And if you do have time and you need to connect, just arrange a 20-minute coffee with someone that maybe said something interesting in the chat box, or someone who's in a similar field as you in healthcare or arts or museums or you know, sports, whatever it is. Connect with each other. This learning that's happening right now for me is priceless, which is why I love our professional associations so much. I get so much out of them. Someone who has done a lot of work in virtual volunteering through the decades is Jane Cravens. You can find her blog at coyotecommunications.com. Please check out her blog on the safety and virtual volunteering. I think it's a vlog. I think it's like a YouTube.
Yeah, vlog. It's a blog, but it's also a website, and she has a great video on safety and virtual volunteering.
Yeah.
That it's great.
Jerome Tennille's blog, The Future of Volunteering Isn't Virtual, and I'll tell you why. Just Google Jerome Tennille and blog, and it'll come up. It's called Responsible AF. If you don't know what the AF means, Google that. I'm not going to say it on here. And then Energize Inc. Energize Inc. has a page called Supporting Volunteer Efforts During Coronavirus. And there are hundreds of resources on there. They're organized by industry. There's so much on there right now, and they're updating that daily. So that is another excellent place for resources. Check out the chat box. There are there's a whole bunch of stuff happening in the chat box as well. Sharon asked, Faiza, are you still hosting the weekly Zoom chats? I'm not. If there's an interest, I can. It's really difficult for me because my husband is also working from home and my kids are here too, to keep up the pace of a weekly Zoom chat. But if you're part of VMPC, they have a monthly, I think it's a monthly chat that they're doing. PAVRO has stuff that they're offering monthly. There are so many ways that you can connect right now for free, and you don't always have to be a member. Check out the Alive Facebook page. It's AL!VE, Association for Leaders in Volunteer Engagement, based out of the US. They have Facebook Live sessions that they do and chats as well. If you want me to host one, I can probably do that, but I just don't think I can't really do it once a week.
Saskia added the IAV, the International Association of Volunteer Effort, which is also a great site.
And they are offering webinars also in different languages, which I think is great. And Jessica said TAVA is hosting monthly meetings. A challenge to all of our AVAs out there, just like PAVRO did today in opening up this webinar to everyone, where we had a full 100 people here. TAVA, SAVA, Drava, VPLN, all y'all, everybody, Abacadabra. If you are hosting some stuff online, and if you can accommodate people who are not your members, please think about it. It's not costing you anything more. to do it. Volunteer Pro is doing Facebook Live events every Tuesday with Toby Johnson. That's right. TAVA's meetings for May and June are free. Thank you, Nora, for letting us know. The next TAVA meeting is May 7th with my colleague, Aliyah Ganji. She's going to be talking about, I think it's mindfulness in meetings. Really important. All right, so tons of activity in the chat box. Get online and share with each other, okay? So share, post, cross-post to each other's pages if you have capacity and if you can let people in. All right, Erin, I'm going to lead you through this and I'm going to try to find Kimberly to, oh, what happened to our question and answer? Here we go. Let's go back here. Ask us anything.
Oh, there you go.
Any questions? Yeah. Any questions before we sign off? We've been trying to get everything out of the chat box. Let me try to see if I can find Kimberly.
Hopefully she didn't pull an Erin and mute herself.
I don't know. It's hard to, I have to scroll through like the 100 different names.
You're welcome, Jill, and we're so glad that you could come out. What a wonderful, wonderful conversation we've had today.
All right, if there are no questions, I'm going to take us back to this page. I want to end on a high note. What's one thing you're grateful for today? Hands down, I am grateful for all of you and seeing your faces, getting a peek inside your homes, because I'm creepy like that. Some of you have some beautiful plants and paintings. Saskia, good artwork I saw there. Pajama pants. What are you grateful for? Information, this webinar, connection. It's Friday. Yep. Living in Canada. Heck yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Living in Canada, honey. Yelling it to my husband. Being able to work, sharing ideas, coworkers.
Red
bourbon,
delivery.
chocolate.
Still chocolate. I love that.
Hey man, however you cope. For me, it's going to be some Cheetos after my kids go to bed tonight.
Yeah, the spicy
information,
Cheetos.
Sharing, all of you. Being able to work, this group of people, coworkers, carrying my team.
Community, yes, wonderful.
Somebody pop volunteers into that box, please, because I am so grateful for them as well. Yeah.
Yeah, and guys, you know, I hope that you're walking away also feeling, you know, somebody wrote this, like the privilege. We have such an amazing job. We have such a privilege in influencing and building community. And that every privilege comes with responsibility. It comes with pressure. It comes with stress, especially in times like these when we have so much to consider. But Faiza and I have absolute confidence in this community, in this profession, to come out of this stronger and take the best of it, and learn and evolve. So I wrote that I'm very thankful for all of you.
All right, and Kimberly, I was able to unmute you. If you want to take it away on behalf of PAVRO, thank you for having us.
Oh, thank you. Thank you and Erin for giving your time and your knowledge base today. It's just been a very validating conversation. My camera's off, but I have pages and pages of notes of just ideas that resonated with me, and I know that the group also has the same. I think the couple of takeaways that I wrote down were, one, we do not need to prove our relevance right now. You know, we need to just chill a little bit and kind of just let things just be, and just hearing that out loud, I know for me was very validating and reassuring. And then also we just need to understand that we're doing our best. This is a really odd situation. None of us, there's no, you know, handbook on here's what you do in case of a pandemic. Like
100%.
Went to school for volunteer management. And so I think just having a real conversation around what this really looks like has been really, really helpful. And I just thank you and Erin for sharing all the resources and for pulling everyone together. We had so many people register so quickly. I was actually waitlisted, even though I am, you know, part of the organizing committee. I was waitlisted. So I just thank you for opening up and allowing, you know, extra seats so everyone could attend. To everyone who's here, if you have any ideas for future sessions, as was said earlier, please feel free to email PAVRO at pavro@pavro.on.ca just to let us know what your thoughts are on what you need. Let's continue to have discussions like this moving forward. Erin, if you're still on the line, can you talk briefly about your upcoming session on May 20th that we're working with you on?
Yeah, I'd love to, thanks. The session that I'm doing on May 20th will be about the research that I popped, the survey, the link that I popped into the chat box to share with you guys what I'm hearing from you, what I'm hearing from leaders of volunteers in Canada, what differences there are geographically, and then what I'm hearing from volunteers, which is so important right now. I won't obviously have done all the deep dives because the survey is still open, but I'll be giving you all the information that I've been able to glean so far, and really invite you to be part of sharing this information as we continue the next wave of the survey, so that we can learn together, because that's really the best way that we're going to come through this.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And on that note, it is exactly 11 o'clock, and we just thank you all for being here. I think it's amazing that we're all together at 9:30 to 11 on a Friday morning. That's a testament to who we are and how much we love our field. And I just hope that you all stay safe, and have a good day, everyone.
I'm just gonna, it looks like we got Zoom bombed, so I'm just gonna end the conversation right now, okay?
All right, thank you, bye. Bye.